So James and I go way back. No, we met tonight. But but he does have a relative here, I think, Michael Garver, and he are related. So I asked for is there any good story I could share as kind of an intro? But thankfully, no. To your relief, maybe he didn't have any real embarrassing stories or anything. But an interesting story though. So you recently moved to Pittsburgh, and you live on a farm. Is that right? Maybe you'll talk a little bit about that in your presentation. But that's pretty fascinating. Moving on to a farm. So the real introduction. So it's James Dutt. He's a business leader here in Pittsburgh, and he's accomplished many professional achievements since joining Gilbane, as we'll talk about today, for about 3 years now. He's been at Gilbane for about 3 years. And James started with Gilbane as a senior business development manager, successfully developing influential relationships in the local community and gaining market share in select public and private sectors, such as higher education and healthcare. James holds a BMG in mechanical engineering from Grove City College and is a lead accredited professional. And he is a professional engineer here in the state of Pennsylvania. And he has most recently served 2 terms as the Pittsburgh ASHRAE president, providing guidance to members of the organization. With over 15 years of experience in architecture, engineering, and construction, James's experience has been instrumental in furthering the development of Gilbane's Pittsburgh office. In addition, his visionary leadership, effective communication, informed decision-making, and client-centric approach have all led to successfully achieving growth in the area. James is strongly dedicated to delivering projects that have a lasting impact on the community. He has worked on notable projects including University of Pittsburgh Arena and Sports Performance Center, Carnegie Mellon University Robotic Innovation Center, the CMU Hazelwood Green Infrastructure, and Allegheny Health Network's new Wexford Hospital and parking garage, all pretty big projects there. These projects have had a notably positive impact on the Pittsburgh community through job growth, access to state-of-the-art medical care, and access to world-class education programs. James has only 10 more minutes, guys. Okay, no, I'm kidding. James has demonstrated an exceptional commitment to his community, having been a member and leader in several organizations, including Township Supervisor in North Bethlehem Township. James is also passionate about his dedication to education, acting as a mentor to students in many ways, and is the current president of the Alumni Association at Grove City College, his alma mater. James serves as a troop master for Trail Life, an organization whose mission is to guide youth to serve others, to lead with integrity, and to experience outdoor adventures. And he is also affiliated with the March of Dimes in Pittsburgh. James and his wife, Emily Garver, who graduated in '08, live in Scenery Hill. Am I saying that right? Scenery Hill? Is that right? Scenery Hill, Pennsylvania, with their 5 children. They are members of Christ Fellowship Church in Washington, PA. So with that, please welcome James.
I sent that to my wife last night to read, and she said that it sounded more like my obituary. She's already correcting that, but welcome to my wife, Emily, who's here tonight. My 5 kids are downstairs, so if you hear any shrieks, it's probably them. So thank you for having me. I feel very inadequate now that you guys have heard from Pence in the last couple of days, the Winklevoss family, Ed Breen, and now me. So normally when you look at the band poster, like the people like me are supposed to be the openers, right? We're like in small text down at the bottom. So it is, many of my friends and family have found it very funny that this is the lineup, or even that I'm allowed to speak to a graduate program. I'm looking forward to that reason. So first, let me just tell you a little bit about Gilbane and what we do, and I'll tell you a little bit about my story, my journey from. I'll just start at Grove City and not bore you with the story of my birth all the way until then, and then talk a little bit about life as an executive and the move from being someone who is, quote, an expert in what they do to someone who is an executive and a leader. And it's a little bit of a mental challenge, and many of you are probably going through some of this in the MBA program. And to the undergraduates, welcome. I'm glad you're here. You guys have a long way to go. So Gilbane is a family-owned company, which brings a lot of unique advantages. It also brings a lot of, I would say, just respect for the people that have come before us, as we look at a company that has its fourth, fifth, and sixth, and now seventh generation of family members involved in the business. If you have done any reading on what that means for a family business and the legacy, that is just incredible. To see the family work the way that they have worked since 1870. Today we do about $7.5 billion of revenue. I'm just a little bitty baby business in Pittsburgh, but very proud to be part of the Midwest. For us, a little geography lesson. For us, Pittsburgh is the gateway to the Midwest. Some of you may agree or disagree. Perhaps the only thing I agree with Ed Gainey, the mayor of Pittsburgh, on is that Pittsburgh is a Midwestern city stuck in a mid-Atlantic state. We start in Pittsburgh and we go west out to, today, Rochester, Minnesota, where we're working for the Mayo Clinic. So a little bit about me and perhaps why I'm here tonight. As Brian mentioned in that very eloquent, lengthy introduction written by our marketing department, I graduated from Grove City with a mechanical engineering degree in the class of 2007, where I was class rank 478 out of 543 students. That's right, 478 out of 543. My major was mechanical engineering. I graduated with a GPA of 2.65. With 3 Ds and 1 D minus in my career here at Grove City College. My wife graduated second in her class the following year and does not love that I share this information about myself, but I share this to you, especially to the undergraduates, as an encouragement to you that things can be tough when you're an undergraduate student. You can really suck as a student, and you can still get a job and be okay. And there are moments in my sophomore and junior years in particular where I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it. This is bad. But there were just moments in there with faculty members and with some of my, I'll call them my colleagues, the other students at the time, where just the ability to work together and to struggle through difficult times was very much the case. I loved it here. College was a great 4 years. I won't be one of those people who are like, hey, it was the best 4 years of my life. I don't wish I was back being an undergraduate again. I've loved the journey, and I've loved everything I've done at this point, and I hope I have a lot of years left to go in my career. But I really do love and appreciate Grove City. It's why I've continued to be so involved as an alum. But I started my career interning for a company called Burt Hill. They're no longer in existence. They've since been purchased by a larger company called Stantec. I started interning for them in Pittsburgh, went to Butler. We call it exiled to Butler. If you're from Butler County, I apologize. But we got exiled to Butler, went back to Pittsburgh, and then I did something crazy. I moved to the Middle East, and I lived and worked in Dubai for a couple years right out of school. Just little tidbits that I'll throw out today as just far as advice is do kind of maybe do that weird thing. I was given an opportunity to go somewhere and move somewhere with 2 suitcases. I had no wife, no children, no responsibilities, didn't own a car. What do I have to lose, right? Like, sure, I'll go learn how to be an engineer in the Middle East. Like, this will be fun. And it was. We got to go to great places. We got to do crazy things. We got to build really tall towers. And it was a very formative time in my life. So you graduate from college and you're kind of in this ecosystem here. Some may say a bubble at Grove City College. It's a great place. Back then we had a terrible football team, a little different than now. But I leave and I move to the Middle East, and I learned a couple things very, very quickly. So the first was growing up in sort of a Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, conservative Christian context. When you leave that and you leave sort of the bubble and you find out that there's a great big world out there, it's somewhat traumatic at times. Like you're like, hey, this is a different place. So you move to the Middle East and you're living in a Muslim country. One of the first things that I was advised to do, and I did, was find a local church. And being plugged into a group of other believers in a very sometimes hostile environment, both from a non-Christian perspective and then from a Muslim perspective, was so impactful to me early, both in my career and just at that time of my life. So encouragement would be to you to go do that as well. So I spent 2 years there. While I was still a student, I was a Red Box missionary here on campus. Had the opportunity to spend a summer in Uganda working for Engineering Ministries International. That was sort of my first clue that you could use what you do for a living as service to Christ and to his kingdom. And that it doesn't just have to be that you're like volunteering at VBS, which is not a bad thing to do, but that you're also trained and educated to do certain things. Like maybe you're going to grow up and be an ophthalmologist, or maybe you're going to grow up to be a construction guy, or you're going to grow up to be a teacher. Use the gifts and that you've skills you have for service. So interned with Burt Hill, interned with EMI, went to work full-time for Burt Hill in the Middle East for a couple of years. Then came 2008. And so those of you who are my age or older will remember this thing called the Great Recession, and it was horrible. And it was really, really bad if you were in the built environment in particular. All that stuff about the mortgage banking crisis and the failure of society and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it was true. It was really bad. But I will give you an example. I was talking to the grad students earlier about sort of God's sovereignty and how doors open and doors closed. And that was a moment that was super critical because the class of 2007 had a very, very, very different experience than the class of 2008 when it came to getting jobs when they graduated. And there was really nothing that the class of 2007 did to deserve a really hot job market. And there was really nothing that the class of 2008 did to deserve a really bad job market. It just sort of luck of the draw, right? This is where you showed up. Only I wasn't supposed to be in the class of 2007. I was supposed to be in the class of 2008. And this is just like one of those moments that was ordained outside of me that put me in a very interesting, but in this case, good position, but it was sort of beyond my control. So I was born in Canada. And in Canada, when you want to start school, the cutoff is December 31st. And my birthday is in September. So here in the United States, when you want to start school, what's the cutoff? August something, July something sometimes, but usually August 30th, right? Like that's like the day. So we actually moved to the US the year that I'm planning on starting kindergarten. I'm 4, turning 5. And we move here, and they're like, yeah, you're actually going to have to wait a year. And my mom's like, absolutely not. Get him out of my house. He's going to kindergarten. And so I start kindergarten, quote, a year early, which puts me in the class of 2007 instead of the class of 2008. And so if I graduate in 2008, there's no Dubai. Dubai has collapsed. It's crashed. It doesn't exist, right? I mean, it's just it was a sandbox that just imploded. And so there would be no Dubai, there would be no experience overseas, there would be no international version of me. I would have just had a very different experience as you heard, a bad student trying to get a job in a rough economy. But instead, I'm a bad student trying to get a job in a good economy that leads to a really unique experience. And it's not because of something that I did, it's because of something that happened totally outside of my control, ordained by God, beyond me. So the world ends in 2008, or at least it felt like it for a little while. And so in 2008 and early 2009, I decided that I need to find another job because it was very clear at that point in time that the work that I was doing was going to end very soon. And that kind of brings me back to Grove City again for a minute, because the company I went to work for next, Karpinski Engineering, recruited heavily here at Grove City College. One of the things I shared with the group earlier was that the value of your degree is not static. It goes up and down over time based on the performance of the institution and the performance of you, our fellow alumni. And Karpinski really liked hiring Grove City College graduates because there had been some great ones before me that had done really great things for the company. And in end of 2008, beginning of 2009, I emailed the guy that had recruited me that I had turned down actually when I graduated, because I said, hey, Cleveland, Dubai, I think I'm picking Dubai. And I'm coming back and be like, hey, remember me? Like, I need a job now. So I ended up in Cleveland in early 2009 working for someone that had offered me a job that I had turned down, that has become a lifelong mentor to me. And so I spent 6 years in Cleveland. We bought our first house there, had our first kids there, and then ended up coming to open an office for Karpinski in Pittsburgh in early 2015. I was with Karpinski until 2021, until I left to join Gilbane. And so that's sort of that arc of my career has had some interesting ups and downs. And what I want to share with you is really how I think this is applicable to you as well. You're going to have your own experiences. You're going to have your own God-ordained path that comes from the circumstances that you find yourself in. And maybe that's the nonprofit world. Maybe that's because you're becoming a teacher. Maybe it's because you're becoming, rolling into a different role within your business. But I think what you're going to find is that some of this stuff is very, very applicable to you in the progression of your career. Because when you graduate, one of the things that my first boss out of college liked to tell me was that, hey, I know you have an engineering degree, but you really don't know how to do anything. And I think that's true for most of us, that we start and we're just a complete novice. We don't know how to apply the education that we have received here at Grove City. And it was great, right? Whether it was an economics class or a teams and team leadership class, intellectual property, or perhaps even this one, you're hopefully getting to the point of understanding how to apply the knowledge that you've received. And that starts to turn you into something. It turns you into an expert. So you don't want to live in novice land for too long, but you're going to be there, right? And you become an expert in your field. And that's going to look like different things for different people, but you're going to know what you're doing. And people are going to start to recognize that you know what you're doing. And they're like, I know what we should do. We should promote them to manager. This is a great idea. Now you no longer actually get to do stuff anymore. You just have to deal with everyone else and their problems. And you're potentially going to become a really good manager. And for some people, that's where this stops, right? Like, this is, maybe you max out your skill set. Maybe it's just the end of your desire to grow in your career. These are not bad things. But this little group right here may look like a lot of teams that you're on at work. You've got the new kid, she just graduated from college, doesn't know much. You're struggling with their work habits, that new generation. Maybe you're a grumpy boomer. Maybe, you're an expert in your field at this point, and you're like, I don't understand how these people work the way that they work. We could talk a long time about demographics and generations, but other than we can all agree that the boomers are the worst, I think we'll skip that for tonight. But then you start to see these disparate groups like this functioning in the workplace, that you have managers managing groups of people that are made up of these novices and these experts, and people on this continuum of, I just graduated and I don't know anything, to I'm really, really good at my role, or I'm really, really good at the context of this role. But many of you in this program are on your way to something else. You're on your way to more of an executive role, and maybe you're there already. Some of you, the people you've heard from obviously are fantastic, but many of you maybe already be sitting in this seat. But I'm going to postulate tonight that you should think about 5 different things as an executive that are different than what you thought about, both as a novice, obviously, as an expert, but specifically as a manager, that as a manager of your specific team or your component or your product or your thing, when you elevate to that next role, your thinking has to completely change. And this is really, really hard because you're, for so long as an expert typically, and then as a manager, you're worried about one thing. And that could be, again, your group or your group within your group or something like that. But I think there's some other things that we need to think through. So those 5 things are culture, strategy, WASTA, which might be a new word for many of you. It's one of my favorites, service, and a board of directors. And a board of directors is not like the board of directors at your company. So the first is culture. And you'll probably find all of these same things in business books that are written by people that know a lot and that write a lot of great things. But my philosophy on culture has been that employees and people want 3 things. They want to be paid well, they want to have fun, and they want to be challenged. What that looks like in your business context could mean very, very different things. But I think ultimately, if you have those 3 areas covered, you have happy people. When I say paid well, at Gilbane, that's one of our tenets. When you open up like our HR playbook of how we should do things, it says pay people well. That means for every role and in every context, you don't want to see your people leaving for money. Everybody goes to work to make money. This is just like one of those truisms. And you want your people to be paid well so they don't have to worry about money. And you want them to not be thinking, hey, I can go work for my competitor because they'll pay me just a little bit more than me. So our philosophy has been pay people at the top of the scale. If you get the right people and you get high-performing people, just pay them at the top of the scale. And then they'll be happy because they know what the scale is. Like, this is not anymore like a hidden thing. Pay transparency is huge, just in the business environment right now. But more than that, I will say, quote, the younger people in particular have no shame or no worry of disclosing to each other how much they make. So there becomes this is a known thing in the environment. If you work for a nonprofit, you're very familiar with this because it's on the website, right? Like, you just Google it and you can find this stuff out. And so if you are paying people at the top of the scale and you understand that paying people well is important, your people are going to be happy and they're not going to leave you over money. The second is have fun. Now, there's like lots of little footnotes and asterisks to everything I'm going to say, and you might hate it all, and I'm okay with that. But when I say have fun, this doesn't mean like have pizza parties and like do dumb fun things. It means genuine enjoyment of the people that you're working with. So when I say focus on culture, there's a payment piece, which means, yeah, I want to sit at the seat, I want to be at the table, I want to be part of this organization. Then there's a fun part, which is I like the people I work with. They're good people. I trust them. There's vulnerability that's happened, and we're a high-performing team. So if you can make that thing true in the group of people that you're working with and establish a level of trust and establish a level of conversation and real feedback and instant feedback. So one of the things that like I don't like about HR policies and programs is this like, hey, once a year I have to ask people to give me feedback. I want instant feedback, meaning if I'm doing something in a meeting right now, I want someone to text me and be like, dude, like you're out of line, settle down. It's not that important, chill out. Or like, hey, I would like you to speak up more. I need to hear your opinion on this. This is a cameras on meeting. Provide that instant feedback because this allows a culture of trust and again, this genuine enjoyment of the people that you're going to be around. Will you like everyone? No. Should you like your job? Yes. Work was ordained before the fall. So while work has become difficult and that there is sweat and there is toil and there's difficulty to work, retirement is not some sort of like ultimate joy goal that means you beat the system. Work is something that God has ordained for your life, whatever you are called to be. And I think at some level, you should like it. That doesn't mean that it is your sole focus or your idol, but it should be something that you enjoy doing. And I think you should like doing it with the people that you're doing it with. And if you're building that team as an executive, you get to pick them. So it's like even better. Like you are hand selected to be part of this group. The third is a challenge. So I think as you're thinking about your culture, you want to have work that is a challenge. You do not want absolute drudgery. You do not want to do the same thing every day. People want stimulation. They want mental stimulation. They want to know that what they're doing is meaningful. So this does not mean the same thing for everyone, just like pay didn't, right? You are not going to pay two people who do extremely different roles at your company the same amount of money. But for their role, it should be fair and it should be well paid. The same with the challenge. If you have different roles within your company, I would expect that the challenge is different. But you should be setting up plans and setting up strategies that allow people to be challenged in what they do. If you do these three things, I would almost guarantee, as much as I can guarantee in a lecture, that your people are going to be happy and that you have a culture that is going to succeed. The second is strategy. And I would say that these two right here are the two big buckets of how you should spend your time and how you should spend your mental energy. The other three are sort of like the other bits and pieces of the puzzle that come around this. So for strategy, I would say two things. The first is that your strategy as an executive moves from sort of that novice expert manager triangle to the overall organization, and it's the greater than one project or product problem. When you're a manager, you're very much worried about your team, and typically we incentivize you as a manager based on how that team performs or your product does or your project works in that little group. When you become an executive, it becomes really difficult to incentivize executives in a way that isn't malignant or in ways that don't cause me to compete inappropriately against people within my own organization. We have to be able to break that apart and say, I need to look at the greater good as an executive. I cannot look at just what's most important to me. And the biggest place that I see this is in incentive compensation, is because the things that we incentivize are the things that we sort of entice people to do and entice them to think in a certain way. And no matter how much money you make, when there's an incentive in front of you, you're going to be motivated by it. Like, I'm sorry, this is just how it works. If you don't believe this to be true, this will not be the last time in life you were disappointed. That is just how it works, that if we put goalposts in a certain area, we're going to achieve that type of metric, or we're going to try really, really hard to get there. The greater than one project or product means that you have to oftentimes make decisions that are going to make your managers unhappy because it might not be what's best for their project or product. You have 2, 3, 6, 10. At Gilbane, we have 40 businesses, right? I'm one of 40. Sometimes the enterprise makes decisions that are not what's best for my individual business. But you know what? I'm hoping it's the best decision for the overall business because I need the overall enterprise to succeed. I need the overall enterprise to be profitable, not just me. So if I do really, really well and the enterprise goes defunct, we failed. So there's a thought process that changes. The second part of the strategy that I see is scenario planning, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but do you come up with alternate scenarios that can happen? You are not going to achieve all of your goals, ever. It's just, if you did, you set the wrong ones. But if you look at the goals and the things that you're trying to achieve as a business or as an executive, there are going to be different outcomes. And there's going to be surprises, and things are not going to go the way that you thought they were going to go. Maybe you're 75% right. Maybe you're 60% right. Hopefully you're above 50-50. But there's going to be things that occur that are going to cause you to rethink your plan. And when that happens, it would be great if you already had some strategies of where you were going to go. When you lose a project or you lose a key person or something tragic happens, do you have a strategy for what you're going to do next? If you win too much work, if you hire an extra person and find out you don't need them, how are you going to respond? And so part of your time should be spent on thinking through these different type scenarios. And a lot of this comes down to financial forecasting, comes down to your sales pipeline, comes down to your understanding of where your business is going to go, where the numbers are going. And if you don't hit that number, what does that trigger? And if it's a bad trigger, what are the ways and what is the time frame that you need to address this? Many times, particularly in, I would say, labor-heavy businesses, we wait too long because we don't want to let people go, which is really good. Like, we shouldn't want to let people go, because this goes back to the culture one, right? Like, we're paying these people well. We like working with them. We've gone through challenging things together. If you have a strong culture, you don't want to get rid of the people that make up that culture. But there are other times where someone's not a good fit, or the scenario is such that you have to make an adjustment. Do you understand the time frame in which you need to make that adjustment to better sustain your organization? So think through these things as you're thinking about a 6-month plan, your next quarter, a 3-year, a 5-year, and what happens, and what can happen, and what might happen. The third thing you will find yourself spending your time on is wasta. What is wasta, you may ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. So I'm going to read this to you. Wasta is the Arabic word for intermediary or connection. It represents a complex web of personal friendships and influence that extends beyond mere networking. It encompasses the ability of connections, favoritism, and the ability to navigate social hierarchies. Now, if you Google wasta, which you should do afterwards, you also read like all the stuff about nepotism and corruption in the Middle East and things like that, some of which is true. But I'm going to talk about the positive side of this, which, as an executive, it is navigating complex webs of personal relationships and cutting through the things that don't work in society. So again, we would all like to think that we live in a very fair world where you submit an RFP or you apply for a job, or just random things happen and that gets you everything you've hoped and dreamed for. That is not how the world works. And that's okay. Deal with it. I'll give you a personal example of this. So in 2008, 2009, I'm applying for jobs because, again, the world was ending as we knew it. And I applied for an engineering firm in Pittsburgh. And it was the largest one. It was the job I wanted. I had a fraternity brother who worked there. I was like, this is the job for me. And I got this, right? I'm qualified. I have a little bit of experience. It was my second job, so my GPA didn't matter anymore. This is good stuff. So I apply, I interview, great interview. We went to dinner afterwards. I was like, all right, I'm going to get this one. Next day, he calls me, my fraternity brother, and he goes, hey, you're not getting the job. Really? I thought everything went well. He goes, no, it went great. Turns out one of the other partners has a nephew that got laid off somewhere else. We're going to hire him instead. Okay? That's disappointing, but all right. So I don't get the job. 4 or 5 years later, I'm competing against that group. And we beat him out on a really nice project. And because, Gmail is forever, I go back and I find that email where I got rejected. And I forwarded it to my fraternity brother, who's still at that company at the time. I said, hey, remember this? And he goes, you looking now? I'm like, no, I'm good. But, sometimes it doesn't work out, even with the connection, right? That's just, it's life. But what I'll tell you is that there's a lot of things in the world that just don't work the way that we want them to work. And as an executive, are you able to cut through all of those things and understand what phone call you have to make and who do you know that can change the trajectory of something? This is not something I spend a lot of time on, but there are often times where your team gets to roadblocks where only you are the person that can remove that roadblock, or that only you can make the phone call to the person that can remove the roadblock. And that could come down to a financial thing, it could come down to a people thing, it could come down to a lot of different things. But knowing when it's you that has to make that phone call and having a network that is developed enough, that's really critically important. So I would ask, like your homework assignment for this is to do this and understanding your network map. So this is a fake one, but I'll just like walk you through it, for example. So this is what I was talking about to the grad students about LinkedIn and the network map that is now defunct. It used to make something like this for you that was like really cool and wasted a lot of time in the afternoons, but like you can do this own thing in your head that will be super helpful to you. So like, let's just pretend like the green is like my first job. So like those are all the people that know each other. And then maybe like the blue is my second job. And the other blue or purple over there, whatever color it looks like to you, is all the people I went to school with. And you start recognizing all of these little connections that you have with other people that are doing other things. And so at work, we talk about this a lot, right? Like, who's the decision maker? Who's on the committee, but then like, who's actually the decision maker? How do we get to that person? And if you're someone who's trying to sell to us, it's kind of a similar thing, right? Like people will look at me sometimes and be like, oh, he runs the business. Like he's the decision maker. Yeah, but I don't want to be, right? Like I want to empower my teams to be able to make that type of decision. So maybe calling me isn't the best play. Like I'm probably just going to forward it to who I want to make the decision anyways. So can you start to understand what that looks like? And the term that we use for this is zippering, meaning at every level of our organization, we want to have a zippered connection to someone at your organization as our owner or as our client. Meaning the people that are working together on something, when they are in conflict and can't come to a resolution, which I know it's hard to believe that happens sometimes, but it does, right? Like then it needs to kick up levels, and eventually it needs to get to the two people that are like, look, this is dumb, we can solve this. And that goes back to the strategy piece of thinking outside the project sometimes as to what's the best decision for the overall organization. But as you think through WASTA and this complex web of connections, it's the time and the relational equity that you've spent with other people. Now, this is something my wife and I talk about frequently, which is like, why do you go golfing? Why would you go to that event with that person? Like, you're not even working with them. Not yet. And I also don't know who that person knows. And I also don't know when that person might need me. Or I might be able to help them. There's a lot of just advancement in your career that comes from being kind to other people and giving your time and your energy to them because somebody else did that for you. Somebody else spent time with you to get you to where you are today. And I've got 4 or 5 people in my career that have really for no personal benefit to themselves whatsoever have helped me along. I'll use Dick Jewell as an example, former president of Grove City College. Okay, I met Dick smoking cigars on the Kettler steps when I was a freshman. You may remember this. He just wanted to come hang out. We developed a friendship over the time that I was a student here. I was on chapel staff. I would escort him and his wife Dale to different events. Then I graduated, and he thought it was cool. I went to Dubai. Moved back to the States. We would just correspond sometimes. I would ask him questions about like my career and what I was doing. And he's like, well, I'll introduce you to someone. And the next thing you know, like this is like, it blossoms, right? And like, I've never been able to help Dick in the same way that he's been able to help me. But it's the time that he's invested and just the care that he's taken and just the great kindness that he's given to me to think through things in my own career and help me along in ways that just I can never repay him for. But maybe I can repay that to somebody else. If I can give you some tips on this, it's never keep score. This is not a quid pro quo type of situation that your networking and your complex web of relationships is there just, if I do this for you, you'll do this for me. No, this is I'm here to be kind and to do unto others, and I'm going to do this for you because I can help you, not because I think you might be able to do something in return. Does it all equal out in the end? Is there some sort of cosmic Jesus karma that comes back in circles to help? No, there's not. There's all sorts of people that, again, just like my situation with Dick and me, that I've helped or move their application along or something that aren't going to quid pro quo me somewhere else. It's about being the person you want to do business with. It's about navigating those social hierarchies. and it's about extension of your influence as an executive to get people done for the people that you care about. And that's a really special thing. The fourth is service. And I think this, again, is like one of the, what I'll call the minor keys here of like WASTA, is that your service to others and to your community is a really important way that you can spend your time. There's an influence that comes as you rise in the organization that is just different than when you're a manager. So if you're an expert, yes, you can share your expertise, but there's something weird about titles that, like, your title matters, and to some of you it matters like in a really kind of weird way, but like your title does matter in just how you present yourself and the rooms that you're allowed into, and just, again, I'm sorry, it's just how it works. I don't make the rules. But you can use that in a positive way for service. So some of that is support. Like, what do you support with your finances, with your time, and with your influence? One thing for me is Grove City College, right? Hey, I love this place. I like what it's doing for future generation. It's a roadmap to the future for me as I think about, hey, where are we going as like America? Where are we going as far as like higher education? What does the future of this campus mean for Christian conservatism in the entire world? If the economic theories of Austrian economics keep going, is this a good thing? Yeah, I think so. So like, hey, this is good. Do I care that students here are being nurtured and cultured in Christianity in ways that they're not at other institutions? I sure do. So that's an organization that I choose to support. Sometimes it's just throwing your weight behind something else and saying, hey, this over here, pay attention to this. Maybe it's just because a bunch of people are connected to you on LinkedIn and you can get exposure to something like Camp Susquehanna. Like, hey, they got something going on up there. They're selling great lattes in Williamsport, Pennsylvania for the month of November that supports Peter and the work he's doing. So go buy one at Alabaster Coffee this month. That's an example of how you can support something, even though I'm not going to make it to Williamsport this month. But did you know that he makes $60 on every one of those lattes because of the support he gets from other businesses in Lycoming County? What a cool thing. So you can find your things to do and support in your community with the people that you're with in your role that are really unique and special. And again, this starts building out the reason I want to do certain things. So I've come and lecture at undergraduate classes here sometime in the HVAC department or the mechanical engineering department, which ironically, I got a C in that class as a student, and now they have me come talk because I'm an expert in it. So if you ever meet Dr. Barty, just remind him of that. It's why I help with Carnegie Mellon's architecture program. There's just things that are happening in the community, and if you want to shape the future, you start having to walk back to where the future is shaped. The last is the board of directors. And what I mean by a board of directors is you need to develop a group of people around you that you will actually listen to. These are not people, there's lots of people that in your role will give you advice and tell you what they think you should be doing. I spend most of my time talking to people who work for me or people that are vendors or others that, hey, here's what I think you should do. Here's how you should be running the company. Here's how the company should be doing this. Here's why I am upset this week. Okay, thank you for sharing. Some of that is good. Some of that is actionable. Some of that comes back to there's an impediment or a roadblock that I can navigate that they can't, right? Like I can call someone else in an organization and make something move. Sometimes it's our own organization. Your own organizational politics are difficult to navigate depending on the organization that you work for, right? You work for a large institution, difficult. You work for a large institution, difficult. You work for a small one. Maybe that's even more complicated because there's less people to hide behind. But there becomes organizational things to navigate. When I say that people that you will actually listen to, it goes back to that cultural piece of people that are potentially outside of your own organization and your own field, that you have a level of trust and a cone of silence with, that you can talk about the big issues with, what you're struggling with, what it means for your business, what does this look like moving forward, what if I don't win, and what if I lose? What does that mean? And you need people that'll be honest with you. And if you start to identify people that are peers or potentially the people your level or that of above, build those relationships with other people. And you can do that through organizations, or you can do that through just your own networking and the people that you know, that you can go to for advice and say, hey, I am struggling with this decision. And this is a decision that like I have to make. And there are some weighty outcomes depending on which way I make this, where this goes. And when I say that there are people that you will actually listen to, there's lots of people that you will go to and sort of ask advice of or ask their opinion of, but I mean, you don't really listen to them. That's fine too sometimes, I suppose, but you ultimately want people that when they tell you something, this group of people that are around you, that when they say it, you're like, yeah, I believe you, and I will do something about that. There's another one of my peers, another business leader in another city that, you know, he and I will sometimes text each other on these meetings that we have and be like, hey, like, I feel really frustrated and like it feels like I'm talking about inside out here now. I feel like anger is in the cockpit. Am I coming off that way, or like am I clearly communicating my frustration in a way that doesn't make me sound like a petulant baby? And sometimes people are like, no, you need to tone it down. Like that was a line that was too far. We were joking the other day that one of my peers had crossed the line. He's like, well, you know, you don't know where it is until you crossed it, but boy, did I cross it. And that's what I mean by early warning signs. Are there people around you that when you're describing your business and what's happening that are able to give you like a little alert that's like, hey, man, really sounds like you're all in on that client. What if their business plan and their model goes under next quarter? What if their funding doesn't come through? What does that mean for your business? What does it mean for all the people that work for you? When you start putting that into the context of how many people work for you and multiplying it by 3 to 4 for the number of people in their family, and you realize that every night they're going to bed really banking on the fact that tomorrow they have a place to go to and that you're going to come through for them with the amount of work that they need, that they're going to have a place to go, that their paycheck's going to come in, that you're paying for their health care, that their kids are going to get their orthodontics because they work for you and you provide that benefit. There's a weightiness and a gravity that comes with that as a leader. And when you start breaking that down into, and this is the part where it like starts to like get a little twisted in your head, where you're like, man, that means like I need so many million per day or per week or per month to pull this off, which means if I didn't win $37,263 in the last minute, I'm not going to make my number next quarter. Okay, so that's a little too granular, but like when you pull back from that, it's are you developing that roadmap, and are you developing that plan that says, hey, yeah, in 2026 we're going to be okay. You know, guys, you're all going to have a place to come work. We're going to keep developing this culture where we pay you well, where you're glad to be here and can have fun, and where you're challenged. If you have people around you that can sort of nudge you and say, hey, are you sure? Now, sometimes at larger organizations, this is sort of built in. Like you're developing your forecast and your roadmap and your plan. Maybe for you at a smaller organization, this is like, oh gosh, we've never thought about this before. But I would ask that maybe you think about that a little bit and say, hey, are there people around me that I can bounce these things off of that can help you? This group also helps you with your brand. And I don't mean the brand of the place that you work for. I mean the brand of you. Because ultimately, you are also a type of product. And unless you are the sole proprietor and owner of your company, you may or may not be there for your entire career. I am naive enough to think that every time I take a job, that is the place where I'm going to go retire from. I thought that at Burt Hill. I thought that every place I went, I'm like, yes, I'm going to retire from here. And I genuinely hope that I do. But then there's also like the reality of just the macroeconomic and environment in the world in which we live. And sometimes that changes. So if you have people around you that can help and say nice things about you and also tell you the truth, that becomes a really important piece of what you have. Because oftentimes you have people working for you that you decide the future of their career, the outcome, their fate. And so if you ask them a question, they're going to give you an answer, and they might mostly tell you the truth. But then there's other people that you ask the same question of, and they're like, no, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You cannot do that. Those are the answers that you want to hear sometimes. And if you don't want to hear those, that's a different problem. But those are the answers that you need to hear sometimes from people that are willing and honest to tell you that that is a really dumb idea. And as you develop that group of people around you, it can come from many, many different places. I mean, some of the places that you go for advice, I would say, should be non-typical. Maybe it's people that are retired, that don't see the stuff in the day-to-day anymore. Maybe it's people that are in just a completely different industry from you, but that really understand at the foundational level that these things are true, right? Like culture and strategy, however that plays out for you in your context, in your work environment, it's going to be different in mine, but that people matter and that the people who work for you really matter, that becomes a really critical piece. So find those people and build that out around you. I wish I could tell you how much time to spend on each one of these things. I think for me personally, even at this point in my career, is I really struggle with that sometimes. Like, how much time should I spend on each one of these things to be the most successful me? And I think that's something that, like, for me personally, with like my board of directors and the people that I work for and work with and ask from, like, hey, how much time should I spend focused on culture? And I think the answer varies. But as I look at these, and if you just pull up your calendar from the last month and look at how you've spent your working hours, I would ask you to think about which of each of those things fall into. And what you'll notice on here is, like, there's not a lot of what I would call, like, quote, actual work. It's like kind of weird sometimes, because as you move out of like novice and expert to manager, it's like I spend all of my time in meetings, that's a whole other long conversation, but how that time is spent in those meetings and with people becomes really the key piece of this. And sometimes those meaningful conversations and connections happen really, really quickly, and sometimes they take a really long time. Depending on personality type, the amount of time you've known each other, just the gravity and maybe the weightiness of a situation really can lean into that. But I would just ask that you spend some time thinking about categorically how you want to spend your time as a leader. And it was recently sort of posed to me, like, how many work days there are in a year. And sort of like that, like, revenue and that worry about providing for people, there becomes this, hey, we're in November, we still got a long time to go to the end of the year, right? And then you start counting down how many days are actually left. And what does that mean from like an hour perspective? There's a recognition of scarcity of time, and that you only have so many things that you can prioritize with the hours you're putting towards it. So as you look at this, you start thinking to yourself, well, where do I get the most bang for my buck? What do I have to do that nobody else can do? And Emily's heard me say this lots of times, but like, the best part of my job is I can do whatever I want, except when I can't. And that's the really difficult part, is I can do whatever I want as long as I'm hitting my goal and my target and my people are happy and I have enough work, and like all of these things are true. And then, oh yeah, something bad happens, or there's something unexpected in my scenario mapping within my strategy. There's something new that showed up that we just didn't think was going to happen. There's a new opportunity. or there's a new loss, or we lost a person, or someone wants to quit and they're leaving. And so you have to immediately start to address and then triage these things. But there also becomes this tendency to retreat into what makes you the most comfortable as a leader. And for some of you, it'll be that you're an expert in what you do. And so you'll want to retreat into going back to doing that thing. And the problem with that is you've already hired somebody else to do that thing. So you're not empowering your people to do it. For some of you, it'll be that you are a really good manager and you want to go back and start directly managing this system. And ultimately what you're doing is just micromanaging the people that work for you when you've already empowered them to do that, or you should have. So there becomes this ideological struggle that you have as a leader, that when something like this happens, you need to understand what is the best use of your time, what is the best use of your resources, and really take that moment to evaluate, is this something that I need to be doing? Is this something that I should have somebody else do? Or is this something that just shouldn't be done at all? Let's just blow it out of here. So, so I hope as you are also on your career journeys as I am, that this is helpful to you, and that as you think through these 5 categories, that just as a leader, that this would be something that you'd be able to apply to the work that you're doing in whatever sphere of influence you have, and whatever work God's called you to do. So thank you for your time. I would love to take a few questions, Christy. Peter. All right.
I had a question. Culture and strategy on the top, I like that because it's our MBA program.
Yeah.
Extraordinarily rare. And it's co-located in
40 different markets. Yeah.
markets, headquartered in Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, yes.
And I also imagine, I could be wrong about this, but based on the nature of your business, you scale up and scale down.
Yes. Well, we try not to, but that can happen. Yes.
How in the world do you make that environment privately held family? Mind-boggling.
So the Gilbane family is special. I'll just start there. They are very special in how they have thought through these things. One of the great benefits of being a family-held company is that we are not, while I might complain every quarter about quarterly outlooks, it's very different than if you work for a publicly traded company, which allows us to make decisions as an organization that are right for the future and not for, quote, the shareholder or the next quarter. So there's been times where the Gilbane family goes, yeah, that might not be what's best for 2025, but it's what's best for 2030. And so we can make decisions that allow that to move forward. The other super interesting piece about Gilbane, the way that we're organized, is that, I'm not a family member, and in fact, no one who runs any of those cities that you see on this map, even within the Midwest, is a family member. So while they're within the organization at varying levels, they have also selected other people to run the business. Our CEO is not a family member, but one of our regional presidents is. So there becomes a desire to find the right people, and sometimes family members don't want the job. I mean, many of you have worked in family businesses, and sometimes there's a kid that's this is not what I want to do with my life. This is not my calling. This is not my career. And sometimes they're forced into it, right? Because it's a family business, and they're like, you have to do this. We're at a size and scale where that's not the case, but it's also a place where it's super exciting to see these 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th generation family members coming in. What's interesting about our business on the culture side is that I I frequently describe that this is a business of three cultures. In HR, if you're listening, I apologize. But there's the enterprise culture, there's the business culture, and then there's the trailer culture. So at Gilbane, there's 3,000 people working for the company that are Gilbane employees. And we all work for the enterprise and have a culture that's built in a certain way, and that my relationship with like Big Red Gilbane is one thing, right? And I attempt to replicate that culture in Pittsburgh in my business here. But then in each job trailer, so each project, as we talked about earlier, has its own little office out on that project site. There's a culture in that trailer too, that hopefully looks like the Pittsburgh culture, that hopefully looks like the Gilbane culture, because we're all kind of like dotted and threaded together. But as you move people from one job to another, it becomes difficult, right? Because you've got sometimes 2 to 3 years of people working together in very close proximity under very stressful conditions. And then at the end of 2 to 3 years, we cut a ribbon and we're like, okay, so you're going over there, and you two are going over there. And they're building a new culture all of a sudden in a new trailer on a new project. In some ways, that's super difficult. In some ways, that's super helpful because of the transient nature of it. Think about Grove City. Every 4 years, everybody here turns over. If you were in a fraternity or sorority here, every 4 years, everyone in that entire organization turns over. Does it still look like the organization that was here when you were there? Maybe, maybe not. And so part of that is, do you have the thread and the foundation and the infrastructure in place at the enterprise and the business level to drive it down to the smallest level? So as those people turn to other places and as you bring new people into the organization, are you, and I use this word in the positive way, indoctrinating them with the culture and the core values when they show up? Do you give them the ability to call things out right away and be like, hey, I don't think that meets the culture of the place that we're in. You know, we believe in integrity. Are we going to do the right thing, even when it costs us money? The answer is yes. So if I see someone who's not doing the right thing, do we course correct? And if you don't, then all of a sudden your core value doesn't matter. If your core values don't matter, you have no culture. And if you have no culture, I can't drive that culture to an office or to a business or to a job trailer. Kevin. Yeah. Yeah. So I would say it's probably not as formal as like you go to like jamesdutt.com and it says like board of directors, right? Like that's not how it's been developed. I would say it's really been developed through I'll call it relational equity of people that you've known over time that you know that understand the role that you're in and also understand the level of trust that is required. When I say the role that you're in, one of the biggest challenges as you think through this little diagram right here, and this burns a lot of people, is when you're at that novice and expert level, you can talk to each other about everything. The expert knows a lot of stuff that the novice doesn't know, but anything you're talking about is really not like private. It's not confidential. It's more or less you're within that team. And then when you get to the manager level, that's mostly true with a little bit of like HR issue, right? Like the manager's got an issue with novice or with expert, but they can still pretty much talk to anything. And then you'll notice that like the managers are connected, right? So like if you and I are both managers in the same organization, I might be struggling with my novice, you're struggling with your novice, but we're still, you know, at the same level. When you start bumping up levels, it gets very, very lonely because you start running out of people to talk to about your problems. Like, and that's often true as well when you get promoted from within, meaning today, novice and expert and I are together, and tomorrow I'm a manager. Well, now I can't really talk about some of the stuff that I now know or organizationally that I was able to talk to you about before. And I really shouldn't be complaining about some of the stuff that I was complaining to you about before, just like culturally within an organization, right? Like, I know we have a great culture and everyone's happy all the time, but sometimes, you know, you got to complain. when you become at a different level, there becomes this problem of like, I can't share everything with you anymore. Like I have, in some cases, legal obligations not to share things with you. And you start running out of like options sometimes of like, I need to talk about this with someone that understands what I'm going through, that understands the mental intensity of what I'm going through, that understands the anguish I'm going through in this decision-making process, and that may not be able to relate exactly to my business, especially if you're in like a trade secret, trademark, patent type of world of like, I need to talk though, and I need to talk through some of these decisions with someone that's going to understand. And as you start to elevate and as you build out your network, you're going to start meeting some of those people. You're going to be invited to different events or different outings or different things where you start to meet these people that are like your similar position, maybe same industry, maybe other industry, that you can start going to and developing these relationships for advice. One organization that does this like super well is YPO, Young Professionals, or Young Presidents Organization. So look up YPO. There's lots of Grove City folks that have been involved in that, where it's like cone of silence, different industries, same roles, presidents or like senior leaders in organizations that you can go to and say, hey, I don't know what to do with this, need your help. And it's really, I would say over time and throughout your career, you're going to pick these people up in your life. Don't burn bridges, right? Like over time, whether it's from your first job or even from when you're in school, you're gonna find people throughout your career that you pick up that know how to do stuff and that are wise, intelligent leaders that you can go to for advice. And in some cases, could be your pastor, could be a friend, could be former colleague, or all of the above. Yes, sir. Hi, Jonathan. I do have 5 children. You want my wife to come answer this question? That's one of the hardest things is understanding what to say no to and what to say yes to and what to involve people in. So in an ideal scenario, everything works out all the time. That almost never happens. So the way I was just having this conversation with someone last weekend, and I described this type of role like an airport. So like when the airport is working well, planes come in and go out, there's coffee at Starbucks, the bathrooms are clean, pilots at the plane, everything works great. Life kind of feels like that sometimes. And then like a pilot oversleeps, or there's like snow on the runway, or a plane's late coming in from Baltimore, and then it's a disaster for a little while you try to sort through everything. I would say there's also decisions that you have to make with your career that I'll call them career limiting or career limitations that you sometimes just have to be okay with. That you have to be able to say no to things, or no to promotions, or no to relocation, or no to you name it, right? Like there's just, sometimes you're gonna be given opportunities that are like, yeah, I'm not at a stage of life that I can even consider that. I would also say that like calendar management is a big piece of this, like understanding big blocks of time and little blocks of time, and understanding like, hey, what can I take my kids to, as opposed to like just skip it all together. So like my kids are here today. I don't know if this is a good example or a bad example, but I'm just, it's an example, right? Like they came up, we went to the football game for a little bit. They're downstairs with our former babysitter. I guess she's not former, she's still here. And Emily's here tonight. So this could have gone differently, right? I could have come up here by myself. Emily could have stayed home with the kids, and that would have been a different experience. Right, wrong, I don't know. But those are the type of things that you have to think through as far as like, can I take people with me or alongside of me, or maybe back to the time thing, like this idea that I would only do one thing in any given day, or like one thing on any particular trip, is kind of dumb when you think about how you should use your time. And I use more of like a blocking strategy of, hey, on Tuesday I want to accomplish this, and I know my schedule is going to change. And you can ask my wife about this, because oftentimes she's like, well, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, I'm not really sure. And she's like, well, it's tomorrow. Yeah, I know. What time are you leaving? I'm not really sure. Like, stuff changes, right? Like, it changes all the time. And there's the triage of priorities becomes really, really important to understanding how you spend your time. And I'm not that great at it. Yes, sir. Isaac. Yeah. 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 Yes, young Isaac, I do. First off, early in your career, forget about the board of directors idea. You need friends, and you need peers, and you need people around you that just like want to run hard after what you're doing. So find yourself a local church, find yourself other young men that are interested in the same thing that you're interested in, and work hard at your career. Never say no to a meeting. Say yes to every single opportunity that's given to you earlier in your career. One of the most baffling things to me, I'm going to sound like a really old person right now, is that, so since COVID, everybody works from home, right? Or like sort of. It's complicated. I went to meet a client a couple weeks ago who is a very senior level person in his organization. And I got to the building, and it's like a random Thursday at lunchtime. I was bringing lunch over with one of our executives to introduce them. There is no one there other than him. I'm trying to put myself into a situation as a novice where like the executive on a random Thursday is just like by himself in the office. Like this just like blows my mind that people are missing out on the opportunity to spend time and get advice and develop their career. There is no substitute for proximity. So the fact that like no one is sitting there in their cubicle 30 feet away from his office for him to walk out and be like, hey, Isaac, glad you're here today. Why don't you come to me with this? Hey, let's go grab lunch and talk about like, you know, what you want to do in your career. Find ways to spend time with other people and develop this. Like this is just like, I just cannot believe it. It really does just blow my mind when I see this happening, that people are skipping out on what's potentially the best moments of their career development. So that doesn't mean you have to go to the office every day. Like I'm not trying to be that guy, but it does mean find ways to spend time with these people. So early in your career in particular, take on additional assignments, ask to be part of things. In some cases, just advocate for yourself to spend time with the experts and the managers and learn and grow. You've probably heard the adage, it takes 10,000 hours to, become an expert. Okay, whatever, but like it takes a while, right? So that first 5 years of your career in particular, you are setting yourself up on a trajectory for the rest of this. And, there's gonna be times that things ebb and flow with both your progression and your career development and what's happening at home or in your family and lots of other things. But that time early on, like, you don't have any responsibilities. Like, you got no home, you got nothing, right? Like, you got time to spend on this that you're never gonna have ever again. And use that time wisely, like steward that time early on. And I would say that even starts here as undergrads, like build those relationships with other people. Like you don't know like these guys sitting next to you, what they're gonna spend the rest of their life with. Like you might all be working for Isaac in the future. Like, I mean, he looks smart, so he probably not, but like, he's going to be like a great accountant. But like, there's some good opportunity of like spending time with other people and developing those relationships so that when you end up with folks later in life, when that board of directors thing starts to pop up, that you have those threads that connect you to other people.
Guys, most of you know that I had the privilege of working for the greatest CEO of last century, fired company on the planet when I was there, Jack Welch. And Jack Welch said, and some of you have heard this many times, Jack Welch said, there's no such place as GE. There are 350,000 people who come to work every day to bust their butts for a common cause. And when they stop doing that, now do you see why I asked James Dutt to close for us? Aligned with that. I love that. I love this philosophy.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm a lousy date, but I did get you this.
Oh, thank you.
I actually didn't get it. Sarah did. Where's Sarah? Sarah did that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks
I
for
really
having me.
appreciate it.